Josiah said, we're going to focus mainly this whole entire time on the crossing at the Red Sea. Now, how many of you in here know how to swim? A lot of you, most of you. How many of you learned how to swim by one of your parents, grandparents, or somebody chucking you into the water to learn how to swim? You did not. Did I do that to you? Man, I didn't realize that was going to go south on me. I don't remember that. But anyway, that's how, unfortunately, most people learn how to swim, is because somebody will take them into the water, take them down to the pool or to the lake. Some of you older folks, it's not being disrespectful, but you guys go down to the creek or to the pond or wherever back in the day, and somebody would throw you in there. And if you came back up, it was like, okay, you taught yourself how to swim, right? When I was a kid, and most of you know this, is I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. If you don't know that by now, I've said it 100 times, but back in Youngstown, Ohio, it's about an hour and a half south of Cleveland, Ohio. And the winters there go from like, what is it, April to April, it seems like. But no, the winters last really long there because they're so close to the lakes and that kind of stuff. We get a lot of snow and it's always cold there. So in the summertime, average temperature in the summer is anywhere between 80 and 85 degrees. If you get to 90, in Northeast Ohio, it's like people start freaking out because they're not used to that kind of weather. That's a heat wave for them. So it's unlike Kansas weather completely. This is one of the reasons why I moved here, is because I really enjoy Kansas's summers, and the winters are not that bad. And we've only had 4 inches of snow. We talked about that with somebody today, this winter so far. But back home when I was a kid, is my parents were big into, okay, we're gonna send you to swimming lessons, and you're going to go and you're going to learn how to swim. This was just something they did. All the kids I knew ended up doing this, is they would go to the local pools back then. They had swimming instructors and all this kind of stuff, right? So I learned how to swim at a place called Bort's Pool, which was about probably a 5-minute walk from the house that we lived in. It was this big, giant, outdoor, in-ground pool that, it went from, 10, 12 feet on one end all the way down to 2 feet on the other end. Here's the problem is that they sent us to do these swimming lessons at the age of like 6 or 7 years old, and they started at 7 o'clock in the morning. 7 o'clock in the morning, the first thing the instructors do is you put on your floaties and that kind of stuff, because we had floaties as kids, is they tell you to jump in the water. Well, in Ohio, even in the summertime, if it's 7 o'clock in the morning, more than likely it's like 65 degrees outside, and you can imagine how cold the water was. So one of the things I really started to hate early on from learning how to swim was they'd have you jump into this big giant swimming pool of ice cold water at 7 o'clock in the morning for no reason whatsoever. But that's how we learned how to swim. And I say all that to tell you is that I didn't get chucked into the lake or anything like that. I had to throw myself in practically. So that's really what we're going to focus on today, is because this is what they did in the ancient world, is that they had what is known as the trial by water. And I want to talk to you today about not only what's going on in the Red Sea, but I'm going to give you a lot of scripture verses today. A lot of times I'll give you commentary. I want to give you a lot of verses. That way you can see that the trial by water is actually all throughout scripture, and it's going to pertain to how we are going to perceive and go through things during the Great Tribulation and after the Millennial Kingdom, okay? And my wife told me to make sure that I say something very specific. So if I forget, Alan, say, hey, what did your wife say? She told me how to end this. If I don't do it right, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. So our focus is going to be chapter 14 of this week's Torah portion. I want to read all of the verses so we can go through that. And then I'm going to explain to you guys the trial by water and what exactly that entails. So if you open up your Bibles, hopefully you guys have Bibles, to chapter 14, verses 13 through 31. And it says, Moses said to the people, do not fear. Stand by and see the salvation of Yahweh, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, you will never see them again forever. Yahweh will fight for you while you keep silence. Then Yahweh said to Moshe, why are you crying out to me? Tell the sons of Israel to go forward. As for you, lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the sons of Israel shall go through the midst of the sea on dry land. As for me, behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians. And you all know what harden the hearts of the Egyptians means now, right? Yes? All right. So that they will go in after them. and I will be honored through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. Then the Egyptians will know that I am Yahweh, when I am honored through Pharaoh, through his chariots and his horsemen. The angel of God who had been going before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel, and there was the cloud along with the darkness, yet it gave light at night. Thus the one did not come near the other all night. Verse 21, Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and Yahweh swept the sea back by a strong east wind all night and turned the sea into dry land. So the waters were divided. The sons of Israel went through the midst of the sea onto dry land, and the waters were like a wall to them on their right and onto their left. And then the Egyptians took up the pursuits, and all of Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen went in after them into the midst of the sea. As at the morning watch, Yahweh looked down at the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud and brought the army of the Egyptians into confusion. He caused their chariot wheels to swerve, and he made them drive with difficulty. So the Egyptians said, Let us flee from Israel, for Yahweh is fighting for them against the Egyptians. Then Yahweh said to Moses, Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may come back over the Egyptians, over their chariots and their horsemen. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to the normal state at daybreak, while the Egyptians were fleeing right into the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, even Pharaoh's entire army that had gone into the sea after them. Not even one of them remained. But the sons of Israel walked on dry land through the midst of the sea, and the waters were like a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Thus Yahweh saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. When Israel saw the great power which Yahweh had used against the Egyptians, the people feared Yahweh, and they believed in Yah and in his servant Moshe. So, here is the question. Is this a trial that's happening? Is there some sort of legal case that's happening with the Egyptians as they are fleeing after the Israelites? And the answer is yes. But the question that needs to be discussed is who exactly is on trial here, and why are they going through this specific type of trial at this specific time, and what exactly is going on here? Now, you guys all know exactly why we study this kind of stuff. And I gave you one brief example with Moses, right, a few weeks ago when we were together, on why Moses was not chucked back into the river when they found him. Okay, this is all going to tie in with that and what the Egyptians believed, all of the ancient Near Eastern nations believed pertaining to a trial by fire, a trial by water. It's known as what's called a trial by ordeal. Okay, but we're focusing mainly on the waters today and a little bit about the lake of fire that's going to be discussed in the book of Revelation. And this is where we're going to end things and show you exactly how this is going to tie in with the bigger scheme of things. Okay? So the cosmic waters in the ancient world. In Genesis 1:2, we read, the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. The waters in ancient Near Eastern thought represented a hostile power. They were the preeminent symbol of chaos, a force that had to be restrained to protect life. Here in Genesis, the waters are but tamed. The Spirit of God hovers above in the implicit authority over them, ready to set creation in motion. Similarly, in Genesis 1:2, we read God created the great sea creatures. This was essentially a reference to a sea monster or dragon that is found in other mythological traditions, such as Ugaritic literature. And the point is that in the biblical accounts, it is just one creature among the others. What he's saying is basically all these people in the ancient world is they viewed the waters as being chaotic, okay? And most of them, remember, in their creation accounts or their flood accounts, there's multiple flood accounts. It's not just one. And it's because, remember, everything was corrupt from the time that the flood happened through Noah's sons and dispersion with them, and everything got corrupted, which is why we have all these additional flood accounts. Well, they believed that this chaos was stemmed from the gods fighting amongst each other, so on and so forth, and this is how creation happened. And the floods were always viewed as chaotic in the ancient world. So they have to figure out, and this is why Yahweh opens up Genesis with talking about this, because all of these people in the time in which Moshe is writing scripture would have known exactly what they were reading in in the book of Genesis. It wasn't about the material origins of creation. It is about who the one true God is and who created all of these things and what the function is of those things. Okay, so water was viewed as chaotic in the ancient world. Okay, and this is why you have all of these nations that turn bodies of water, rivers, and all these sorts of different things into deities. And I gave you a list, and you guys probably can't see these, but I just gave you two examples from the Egyptian mindset and the Roman mindset, because we're going to talk about New Testament verses that are talking about the trial by water ordeal. Now, in Egyptian mythology, they had all of these gods that you see listed here. Happy, yep, his name was Happy, god of the annual flooding of the Nile. Anuket was the goddess of the Nile and nourisher of the fields. Nephthys, goddess of rivers, death, mourning, the dead, and night. You had Nu, who was an uncreated god, personification of the primordial waters. Khnum, god of the Nile River. Satet, goddess of the Nile River's floods. Sebek, god of the Nile River, depicted as a crocodile or a man with the head of a crocodile, which, if you remember when we talked about the concept of Ma'at, and the picture I showed you, is that was one of the gods that was standing there with the crocodile head. So they had all these gods that were attached to the Nile, right? And they also believed that the Nile and all of these other bodies of water were the gateways to the underworld, to hell, to Sheol, whatever you want to call it. That's what they believed. Okay. On the Roman side, you had Fontis, god of wells and springs. Jatuma, goddess of fountains, wells and springs. Neptune, king of the sea. And his Greek counterpart was Poseidon. Now keep in mind, I give you Roman because this is the 1st century mindset. Okay, all of this stuff, these gods are all the same throughout all of these different countries and all these different time periods. It's just the names change, and then the qualities that they attach to these gods just change. You see what I'm saying? Everything is very, very similar with the pagan mindset. So Tiberinus was the genius of the river Tiber. Voltimus, god of the waters. And anyway, you want the PowerPoint, you know how to get it. You can go through this list and study these out. And if you just Google river deities on Wikipedia, and I'm telling you, it's probably, there's 100 of them on there. There's lots of them. So the ancient mythology of the Levant. So what is the trial by the divine river? It was widely practiced in the ancient Near East as a method of divine judgment in cases where there was no evidence of guilt. So, no evidence of guilt, so they have to figure out a way to see if you're proven innocent or you're proven guilty, right? They don't have enough evidence or intelligence to figure out if you can be judged guilty or not. So, this is where the trial by ordeal comes from. And hopefully you're starting to bring into mind a lot of things from like the old English used to do, where they used to burn people at the stake and all that kind of, they burn witches and stuff like that at the stake, and they would do all these trial by ordeals to try to basically eliminate those people because they believed that they were guilty, but if they burned them at the stake and they didn't survive, then that was justification that that person was actually guilty, right? Well, the river part is also just as important. So in the modern judicial system, the innocence or guilt of an accused may be established based on the evidence brought against him or her. In ancient and medieval societies, however, a different way of determining a person's innocence or guilt was used. This was called the trial by ordeal. This method involved having the accused do something dangerous or even life-threatening. If the accused survived the ordeal, he or she is usually proclaimed innocent. If guilty, the individual would perish. Now, I just thought of this, is how often did we do this as kids to each other? I mean, I know that these two boys of mine would nonstop are challenging each other to do something stupid. And it's really, if you survive it or if you do it better than they do, then you become the victor, right? When I was a kid in Youngstown, Ohio, me and my buddy, Chris Halushka, I grew up with this kid, he lived on the next street over, as he and I used to have these knife fights. And I have a knife on me so I can demonstrate, but don't worry, you guys are safe, I'm not gonna throw. So I would go over to my buddy Chris's house, and I'd always have a knife on me, he'd always have a knife on him, and you don't know when it's gonna start. This is on video, so don't worry, everybody's gonna be safe. So you'd be sitting at his house, we'd be playing video games or something like that, and he may pull out a knife and I may pull out my knife, and what we'd do is we'd actually come up to somebody like this, and you'd act like you're gonna stab him, but then right at the last second, you hit him with the butt of the knife. right? I'm sitting in my buddy's living room, and this is a trial by ordeal. It's like, okay, do I really think I'm going to get stabbed? Is he really going to stab me? Or am I going to get out of the way, or am I going to do something wrong and end up getting stabbed? One day I messed up. As I'm sitting in my buddy's living room, and he pulls out his knife, and he was like 6'4" back then. I mean, he was always taller than me. I mean, he was a big kid, so he's got a lot quicker reach than I did. He come at me. I was sitting in his rocking chair in his living room. We were watching something on TV, and he comes out of nowhere, and he comes at me like this, and I'm sitting in the chair, and he didn't move the knife quick enough, and he got me right here. Stabbed me right here like this, and I start gushing out. I got a scar. It's like this big on this knee from that day. And he was so scared because that was the first time that either one of us ended up getting stabbed. So I had to go through this trial by ordeal, but he was so scared that he was gonna get in trouble by his parents and by my parents. And I swore to him, I'm like, dude, I'm gonna get in just as much trouble as you are if I go home like this. So I took one of his tube socks. The tube socks were big back in the day. And I tied this kid's tube sock around my leg, and I walked around like that for like 2-3 days because it needed stitches. And I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna go home and tell my parents what happened. But anyway, he ended up giving me a whole bunch of baseball cards and football cards and all kind of stuff. So I ended up being the victor, right? So even though I survived the trial by ordeal, even though I was the one bleeding, I still survived. But I started thinking about that, and kids do this kind of stupid stuff all the time, is they put each other through these trials to see who's going to come out, and it's not really a guilt or innocence thing with kids. It's just they just want to be competitive. Yeah, my parents did find out years later what had happened, you know. Funny story. So the intention of the trial by ordeal is to leave the judgment of an accused in the hands of a higher force. In European societies during the Middle Ages, a concept known as the, whatever that says, meaning the judgment of God, was the basis for the trial by ordeal. It was believed by societies during that time that God would intervene and protect an innocent person. And this is actually what we believe too also, is when we're going through all these trials of life, is we're expecting that the Creator, that Messiah is going to protect us, right? And then we're going to go through all of these things, and we are going to go through a lot of things. It even says that in the book of Revelation, which I'm going to show you, that you're going to go through all sorts of trials, but we're going to rely on Him to determine whether we are innocent or we are guilty. All right, let's move on. Now, this is extremely important. I'm going to read the slide, I'm going to read the law to you, but I want you to keep this in the back of your mind for about 45 minutes because this is extremely important when we get towards the end. So in the Code of Hammurabi, according to the trial by ordeal, how many know what the Code of Hammurabi is? Okay, a few of you. The Code of Hammurabi is a Babylonian law code that has been in existence for thousands of years. We have lots of evidence for it. They have very, very similar laws as Israel had, but remember, we always talk about distinctions between Israel and these type of nations. But it's a very old law code that we have a lot of things that we can learn from. And we actually just stumbled upon this law a few years ago, Rico, Ryan, and I, and it opened up this whole teaching. And I want to give Rico credit because some of these slides actually came from him through one of his teachings that he did. So this shows you how we all work together, and it is really about us. But anyway, this is extremely important law that is in there. And it says that if the finger is pointed at a man's wife about another man, but she is not caught sleeping with the other man, she will jump into the river for her husband. This jump into the river is explained in an earlier part of the code, where it says this: if anyone bring an accusation against a man, and the accused go to the river and leap into the river, if he sinks in the river, his accuser shall take possession of his house. But if the river proves that the accused is not guilty, and he escapes unhurt, then he who had brought the accusation shall be put to death, while he who leaped into the river shall take possession of the house that belonged to the accuser. I'm going to give you a visual. Dave, come here, please. Dave accuses me of adultery. I'm going to be your, I guess I'll be your wife for a minute. He suspects me of adultery. takes me down to the river in front of a bunch of witnesses, right? And he says, okay, you don't throw me in. I got to jump.
Oh, yeah.
I got to jump into the river, right? If I come out of the river unhurt, and actually, I don't even think this has to do with adultery, the second part of this. The second part is if he accuses me for anything, really. So he would accuse me of doing some sort of crime against you that's worthy of me jumping into the river. And then I would come up out of there, and then he's got to go into the river. And granted, remember, Youngstown, Ohio, concrete shoes. We grew up knowing about it. This is mafia type stuff. They would throw you into the river, you're not coming out. You think that they're really allowed a lot of these people to come out of the river? They had means of throwing them in so they would not come back out. But they still got to write the law to where if the person does survive and comes out unhurt, then you go into the river and then I gain all of his possessions because he was my accuser. And I survived the trial by ordeal, right? Yeah. So, keep that in mind as we get closer into the book of Revelation verses that I'm going to show you. And I don't want to talk about that any further just yet. But all of these nations, the Hittites, the Egyptians, the Canaanites, the Assyrians, the Mesopotamians, all understood this practice of throwing somebody into the river, them surviving it, gaining the possessions, and all this other kind of stuff, right? Now, also what I want you to keep in mind is how we're talking about these ancient people believed in the waters as being chaotic, as being the gateways to hell, the gateways to demonic, portals and all kinds of stuff. Is that what Yahweh uses water for? No. Melanie and I were watching some video a couple of weekends ago. It might have been last Shabbat when we was at home last Shabbat. We saw some video that, what it is those Netflix videos. They have videos on Netflix that you put on if you have a big giant screen, that they just play in the background with music, and they show like all these different, they have this ocean one that shows all these creatures of the ocean. There's another one where they show all these fields and stuff like that, and it plays this nice calming music in the background. That's what we do at our house. But Melanie showed me this one that was all about the ocean and stuff that was in deep. And you look at some of the creatures that are down there, I can see why people thought that this was the gateway to hell, man. Some of these things you're like, wow, God created that? And some of them are just absolutely amazing. Granted the Nile River wasn't that deep, but I mean, who knows what was living in those rivers and what they saw coming up out of them. But Yahweh uses water for us to have new life, right? Water is about bringing life. Water is not about always focusing on death and destruction and trials and killing people. And that's what I want you to see how the contrast is that water plays a huge part in Scripture, and especially when it starts talking about Yeshua being the living waters and all that kind of stuff. So water is used as chaotic and understood as chaotic on one realm of the spectrum, but then on the other end, where Yahweh says, no, water is meant to bring life. It's why you are immersed and that kind of stuff, and it's just amazing how the contrast is. Which brings up the questions. Why is baptism so important from a legal perspective? Why was Moses not killed by the king of Egypt after his daughter pulled him out of the water? You all know that one by now. Why did the Egyptians use the river Nile as a method of punishment of the Hebrews? We know that. Why did Israel have to pass through the Red Sea? We're going to talk about that in a second. Why did the second generation of Israel cross through the River Jordan? Have you ever wondered that? Remember, the River Jordan parts itself, right? It's because they're going through a trial by water ordeal themselves by crossing over into the land safely through the river. And that's Yahweh making a declaration. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Why did Yeshua allow Peter to fall into the Sea of Galilee? Oh. What was the meaning of Jonah coming out of the fish? And where is the message of resurrection in the Bible? All right, so the ancient world believed that the seas, lakes, rivers were the gateways to hell or Sheol. We already know that. Words that are synonymous with death in scriptures, all pertaining to water. Waves, floods, deep. Every time you see these words in a lot of verses, you're going to see that that's pertaining to them talking about death and destruction. So what is the meaning of surviving the waters in the ancient Near Eastern perspective? Surviving the water by ordeal was the sign of innocence and vindication. So if all these ancient nations would throw these people into these bodies of water, into these rivers, and do all these things, they're trying to dictate whether or not they are innocent of the crime in which they're being charged. And if they come out and they survive, then that is that God, and they're not going to go against the gods of the rivers and the gods of the waters in which they believe. And that's those gods vindicating them, which 9 times out of 10, these people did not survive. This is why it's so important when we see Moses is floating down the river Nile, and we saw how many gods were attached to the river Nile. They would never have thought twice about chucking baby Moses right back into the river, because then they would have been going against what the gods vindicated Moses for. All right? Noah and family survived the trial by water. This is where I'm going to start giving you a lot of verses to show you this is everywhere. Genesis 7:16 through 24. And those going in, male and female of all flesh, went in as Elohim had commanded him, and Yahweh shut him in. And the flood was on the earth 40 days. And the waters increased and lifted up the ark, and rose high above the earth. And the waters were mighty and greatly increased on the earth, and the ark moved about on the surface of the waters. And the waters were exceedingly mighty on the earth, and the high mountains under all the heavens were covered. The waters became mighty 15 cubits upward, and the mountains were covered. And all the flesh died that moved on the earth, birds and cattle and beasts and every creeping creature that creeps on the earth, and all mankind. All dry land died. So he wiped off all that stand, which were on the face of the ground, both man and beast, creeping creature and bird of the heavens, and they were wiped off from the earth. And only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. And the waters were mighty on the earth 150 days. So, the whole earth goes through a flood. Right? Why did all these people have to go through this? Why was the earth flooded? What was going on? Cleansing. But he's wiping off all the evil from off of the face of the earth by doing it with a means in which they all would have understood, right? And only one group of people survived. This is why he says that he will never flood the entire earth again like that, and then you have the sign and all that kind of stuff. But he is going to put the earth through a trial by fire, correct? How is that connected? So we see that Noah and his family went through the trial by water ordeal, and they survived. That was their vindication. Yahweh vindicated them, proved that they were innocent, and it says that Noah was found righteous, right? So this is why he saved them from the trial by water ordeal, and they come out victorious. How about Jonah? Have you ever thought of Jonah going through a trial by water? And Jonah prayed to Yahweh's Elohim from the stomach of the fish. He's already got chucked into the fish's guts. He's floating around down in some body of water down there. And he said, I called to Yahweh because of my distress, and he answered me. From the stomach of the grave I cried, and you heard my voice. For you threw me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. Your breakers and your waves passed over me. So I said, I have been driven away from your eyes. Would I ever look again toward your set-apart Hechel? Waters encompassed me unto life. The deep closed around me. Weeds were wrapped around my head. I went down to the base of the mountains. The earth with its bars were behind me forever. But you brought up my life from the pits, O Yahweh, my Elohim. When my life fainted within me, I remembered Yahweh, and my prayer went up to you into your set-apart house. Those observing false worthlessness forsake their own kindness, but I offer to you the voice of thanksgiving. I pay what I have vowed. Deliverance is of Yahweh. Then Yahweh spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah on the dry land. So remember, he gets thrown into this thing because he doesn't want to go to Nineveh, right? Nineveh is one of the most paganist cities on the planet at the time, doing all sorts of pagan things, right? So Yahweh says, okay, I'm gonna chuck you into the belly of this whale, and you're gonna go through a trial by water. And I needed to talk to Rico before today about this, but I don't remember. And I don't know if Matt may remember, but I vaguely remember talking to Rico about this, and that he came across some information that at the time that Jonah was spit up onto the dry land, is that they were having some sort of festival. The Ninevites were having some sort of festival. You remember this at all? I don't remember the name either, but is that they were witnessing him being chucked out of the whale, right? During a festival for their pagan deities, whatever it is they were doing at the time. So you think they would have, now you wonder why they repented? Because they saw him go through this trial by ordeal. And how often do you guys see somebody get spit out of a belly of a fish? I've never seen it. You know, a lot of people think these are just fairy tales, but in reality, if you understand how the ancient world worked legally, everything becomes real possible, right? At least it does to me. Jonah is just another example. So now when you're reading the book of Jonah, you have to look at it from a completely different perspective and know this is exactly what's happening. And this is why the people repented, because they saw that Yahweh was the one who vindicated him. You know? Even though Jonah didn't want to do it. Trust me, there's a lot of times where I feel that way. And I know most of you guys do too, because it's very hard trying to get people to understand what it is we're trying to do. You know, why we're living this way. So sometimes I'm like, I'm not going to them. Hopefully I don't get sucked into a fish someday. Genesis 1, 6 through 10, and Elohim said, let an expanse come to be in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And Elohim made the expanse and separated the waters which were under the expanse from the waters, which were above the expanse, and it came to be. And Elohim called the expanse heavens, and there came to be evening, and there came to be morning, the second day. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it came to be so. And Elohim called the dry land earth, and the collection of the waters he called the seas. Now, I'm reading you this because in this week's Torah portion, chapter 14, two of the verses we just read are pointing directly back to creation in the book of Genesis. And Moshe stretched out his hand over the sea, and Yahweh caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. So you see the variance and the connection between the very first instance of Yahweh creating all of these things and separating the waters and bringing forth dry land. Well, he's doing the exact same thing in a microcosm with the Red Sea. He does the same thing with the Jordan when he parts the Jordan, right? So interesting is the water attached to chaos as well in both of these references. Water as chaos to the nations is opposite to us coming up out of the water during immersion, being new creation, right? So you come up, you decide you're going to say this vow, and you're going to say an oath to Yahweh and to Yeshua, and you want to become this new creation. You want to return back to your original state, you return back to the original image in which you were created in. What does the image bear? The image is you bearing the honor of the King in which who created you. So you want to return back to that state, so you symbolically go down into the water, you come up as a new creation, right? It's a new birth. Where in the ancient world, if they threw you down into the water, it was chaos, it was death, it was destruction. And Yahweh says, no, that's not what it's supposed to be. See how there's distinctions between everything that they did and what Yahweh does? Psalm 77. You are the Elohim who does wonders. You have made known your strength among the peoples. By your arm you have redeemed your people, the sons of Yaakov and Yosef Selah. The water saw you. O Elohim, the water saw you. They were afraid. The depths also trembled. The clouds poured out the water. The heavens rumbled. Also your arrows flashed back and forth. The voice of your thunder rolled along. Lightnings lit up the world. The earth trembled and shook. Your way was in the sea, and your path in the great waters, and your footsteps were not known. You did lead the people like a flock by the hand of Moshe and Aaron. So you see there's references. The Psalms are filled with this, you guys. And I'm going to give you a few examples, but the Psalms are filled with this language of Yahweh's being the one who is the creator. Yahweh is the one who rules over the oceans, the seas, the rivers, and all those things. All this stuff attached to the water is all throughout the Psalms. It's all throughout the Psalms. Psalm 42, my God, my soul is in deep despair within me. Therefore I remember you from the land of the Jordan, the heights of Hermon, from the hill Mizar. Deep calls to deep at the noise of your waterfalls. All your waves and your billows have swept over me. This is why the psalmists are continually using this language of being overwhelmed by water and being sunk into the deep. And Psalm 69 is one of my favorites. There's a band called Sons of Korah that has a song about this, and it's amazing. If you haven't seen it, just YouTube it. This psalm is Sons of Korah All they do is they do music but through nothing but the Psalms. And Psalm 69, 1 through 6 says, "Save me, O Elohim, for waters have come up to my neck. I have sunk in deep mud, and there is no place to stand. I have come into deep waters, and the floods overthrow me. I am worn out from my crying. My throat is dry. My eyes grow dim as I wait for my Elohim. Those who hate me without a cause are more than the hairs of my head. They are mighty who would destroy me. My lying enemies, what I did not steal, I restored. O Elohim, you yourself know my foolishness, and my guilt has not been hidden from you." You see how he's going through this trial? This is a legal case that somebody has brought against him, and he's suffering, and he's using this language of being chucked into the river or into the water to have Yahweh vindicate him, right? It's all about him praying and asking Yahweh to vindicate him. "Let not those who wait for you, O Master Yahweh of hosts, be ashamed because of me. Let not those who seek you be humbled because of me, O Elohim of Israel." Isaiah 43. "But now thus says Yahweh, who created you, Jacob, and he who formed you, Israel, don't be afraid, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they will not overflow you. When you walk through the fire," this is key, "you will not be burned, and flame will not scorch you." He's directly talking about the trial by ordeal, whether it's going to be through water or through fire, which all of these people would have understood. Anybody in the ancient world who opened up the book of Isaiah would have understood exactly what he's talking about here. And Yahweh already says, and this is in Isaiah, so he's already telling you, look, when you walked through the waters, right? So as the children of Israel are leaving Egypt, they're being chased by the Egyptians, right? And the Egyptians would have believed in this concept. And they see them running into the Red Sea on dry ground. And they're thinking, well, some of them were kind of smart. They're saying, look, Yahweh's fighting for them. Let's not go in there. The rest of them not so smart. So they say, well, let's just go right in after them anyway. So they go in after them, right? And Yahweh proves and vindicates Israel. Does he not? He proves that they are innocent. He proves that he is the one true creator. And he's brought them out as a people to create for them a nation. And what does he do to the Egyptians? He convicts them by their own beliefs. Is that not ridiculous? And everybody in the ancient world would have understood what's happening. Remember, I've said this time and time again in the book of Joshua, chapter 2, when he goes and he meets Rahab, right? What does Rahab say? We have heard of your God and all these things that he's done. How do you think she heard? She would have heard of eyewitness accounts that witnessed them going through the Red Sea, Yahweh's pillar of cloud, pillar of fire, and all of these things that are happening to them in the midst of them getting closer to the land, because they would have had intelligence, people. They would have had spies seeking out who is this God and who are these people that are coming towards us. You know, we think that these people don't understand what's going on. They didn't have intelligence and stuff like that. Remember, all of these nations were based off of militaries. And your military is going to have intelligence. If somebody's coming towards your land, you're going to want to know who that is. So they're going to go out and they're going to spy out, just like the Israelites sent spies in. So here Rahab is, she declares that Yahweh is the God above and the God below. Because she saw, or she may have actually seen, but I guarantee you she at least heard eyewitness accounts of what Yahweh did for those people. So he's vindicating Israel by coming through and allowing them to part through the waters on dry ground, and then he ends up killing all the Egyptians, including Pharaoh. And it has to be Pharaoh too, right? It's not like the Charlton Heston movie where Pharaoh goes back, you know, and he gets to sit there with his wife and hopefully build the kingdom again. No, they were all judged. Israel's vindicated. They're found guilty. Jeremiah 31. Thus says Yahweh, who gives the sun for a light by day and the ordinance of the moon, and of the stars for a light by night, who stirs up the sea so that the waves of it roar. Yahweh of armies is his name. So a lot of these verses that you're going to read, especially in the Psalms, where they're attached to the trial by water and talking about the seas and him walking on them, is they're giving him the vindication and the honor of being the one that rules over them, not these other gods that rule over them. So it isn't any other gods, but Yahweh is the true creator who stirs the seas. Now, this is where we're going to start making some interesting connections. We got about 25 minutes left. Now, hopefully after we started going through this, you're already bringing New Testament references into your mind. And it's extremely important that you do so because, a lot of the same, like I said, these gods that these people believed in the Old Testament times, all they did was change names and change peoples who believed in them and added a few different attributes to them. It's nothing old or nothing new in the ancient world, I should say. So John chapter 6. And when evening came, his taught ones went down to the sea. And entering into the boat, they were going over the sea toward Kephar Nahum. And it had already become dark, and Yeshua had not yet come to them. And the sea was rising because a great wind was blowing. When they had rowed about 5 or 6 kilometers, they saw Yeshua walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were afraid. And he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." They wished therefore to take him into the boat, and at once the boat was at the land where they were going. First century world, nobody has been known to be walking on water up until this point. Especially if they got all of these people, all these Roman and Greek gods that they believe, Poseidon, Neptune, all these things that are attached to being the rulers over the seas, the rulers over the waters. And here comes old Yeshua just walking on the water. Want to know why they were afraid? And this is during a storm, no doubt. When remember that there's gods attached to weather, attached to storms. And here he comes with the great wind, and he's just walking around on the water. What is he doing? He's trying to show them that he does have, and this is why I don't understand, the more we study this stuff, why people have an issue with the deity of Yeshua makes no sense to me whatsoever. It makes no sense to me. If one incident by you understanding the trial by water and Yeshua walking on water doesn't prove his divinity to you, I don't know what is. Because he's showing you that all those other verses that you read in the Psalms and in Isaiah and Jeremiah that's talking about Yahweh is the one that rules over the seas, well, he transfers that authority to him, right? And if Yeshua is divine, he's going to be able to do all these things to prove his own authority. Even in the midst of these people that believe in all of these pagan water gods. It makes no sense to me. It really doesn't. Matthew 14. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea. This is a different incident. Agitated by the waves, for the wind was against it. And in the 4th watch of the night, Yeshua went to them, walking on the sea. And when the taught ones saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a phantom." I need to look and see what the Greek is for that. And from fear they cried. But immediately Yeshua spoke to them, saying, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." And Kepha answered him and said, "Master, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." And when Kepha had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Yeshua. But when he saw that the wind was strong, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, "Master, save me." Oh my gosh. Here's Peter. He's like, "Dude, if that's really you, I'm coming out too." Peter has this problem with wanting all this stuff of other people for some reason. He's like, "I'm going to walk out there. I'm going to do this too," right? And he starts to do it. But then it's not just about him doubting, right? He starts seeing the wind around him because, yeah, Yeshua's walking on the water, but the storm's still going on around him. So then that's where his doubt starts to sink in, and then he starts to sink in. This is that he's going through a trial by water. I mean, come on. So then he says, "Okay, save me." It don't get no clearer than this, guys. And immediately Yeshua stretched out his hand and took hold of him and said to him, "Oh, you of little belief, why did you doubt?" And when they came into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat came and did bow to him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of Elohim." All because he's showing them that it isn't all of these other gods. I'm the one who has the authority to walk on this water, to save you, to pull you up out of the trial by ordeal. And they had to witness it because they all understood what was happening. I wonder what the other disciples were thinking. Like, "Peter, you're so stupid. You should have never went out there, dude." Mark 4. And on the same day, when evening had come, he said to them, let us pass over to the other side. And having left the crowd, they took along him with the boat. They took him along in the boat as he was. And the other boats were also with him. And there came a great windstorm, and the waves beat the boat so that it was already being filled. And he was in the stern, asleep in the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, Teacher, is it no concern to you that we perish? And having been awakened, he rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, Why are you so afraid? Have you not yet belief? And they feared exceedingly and asked each other, Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? I just got to read verses. I don't even have to give commentary anymore at this point. All right, Revelation 12. Let's talk about the tribulation. Let's talk about the end of the millennial reign. Let's talk about how Hasatan is going to have to go through a trial by fire. That sound like fun? Yeah. This is the whole point of why we're even talking about this. So Revelation 12 talks a little bit of, and if you're going to study the book of Revelation, you need to do it from multiple perspectives. You need to do it from temple perspective and festival perspective, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, that type of things. But you also need to look at it from a legal covenantal lawsuit against Israel and against the nations. Okay, so it's not this. It's the book of Revelation has seemed to always turn into I got to figure out the timeline. I got to figure it out. Stop trying to figure out timelines. You're not going to figure out timelines. It doesn't matter. We can't look at timelines and then not understand context. I mean, you get the context, then you're going to be able to see, okay, this may be talking about Yom Kippur, this may be talking about Rosh Hashanah, and that sort of thing. Stop trying to figure out timelines to stuff. Figure out the context first and look at it from a completely different perspective than you were brought up. Because you can't look at Revelation anymore. If you're Hebraic roots, Messianic, whatever it is you call yourself, you cannot look at the book of Revelation the same way you did in the church anymore. You can't. So I heard a loud voice saying in the heavens, Now have come the deliverance and the power and the reign of our Elohim and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brethren, who's the accuser? Who accused them before our Elohim day and night has been thrown down. Skip the footnotes. And they overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb and because of the word of their witness, and they did not love their lives to the death. Because of this, rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the earth and to the sea. Whoa, what's he talking about the sea for? Because the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, knowing that he has little time. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown to the earth, he persecuted the woman and gave birth to the male child. Who is that woman? That's Israel. Anybody who chooses to attach themselves to Israel is this woman that they're referring to in the book of Revelation. And the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle to fly into the wilderness to her place. That's just an idiomatic expression. You're all not going to grow eagle's wings. Okay? To fly into the wilderness to her place where she is nourished for a time and the times of a half a time from the presence of the serpent. And out of his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river after the woman to cause her to be swept away by the river. Anybody ever seen that verse before? Yeah, you've seen it, but have you seen it? You're not like that. So now Hasatan is going to be thrown down out of heaven, right? And he's literally going to try to put us through a trial by water ordeal. And he's using this language, which all of these people would have understood, to try to come after us and to try to have the river overcome us, right? So verse 16, and the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the river, which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to fight with the remnant of her seed, those guarding the commands of Elohim and possessing the witness of Yeshua. So, Hasatan throws this river at us, and all of a sudden Yahweh opens the earth to swallow the river and all this other kind of stuff, and then he goes to wage war again and again and again and again after us. After the people of Israel, I should say. Revelation 19. And I saw the beast and the sovereigns of the earth and their armies gathered together to fight him who sat on the horse and his army. And the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, by which he led astray those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. The two were thrown alive into the lake of fire, burning with sulfur. And the rest were killed with the sword, which came from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. So here we see in Revelation 19 that these people are thrown into a lake of fire, of burning sulfur. This is the same context to the trial by water, except Yahweh is the one who's doing it, and he's vindicating all of the people that attach themselves to him, his people, his land, his covenant, and he vindicates them. So if our accuser is Hasatan, then Hasatan is going to have to go through his own trial by ordeal, right? Where he is thrown into the lake of fire. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. So this is all at the end of the millennial reign, right? So Hasatan is released for a little while, and after that is all of the him, the false prophet, or any of these people that are attached to the end of the millennial part of things are cast into the lake of fire to where they'll be tormented. And anybody who attached themselves to following after them is cast into the lake of fire. They're found guilty. They are not vindicated because they've attached themselves to the accuser of us, the accuser of Israel, the accuser of basically Yahweh and Yeshua, right? So Yahweh is using an idea, a principle, a concept that was known from day one with ancient nations, all the way through Scripture, all the way through the book of Revelation, to show how the accuser is then cast in. Remember the law we read, right? Let's read the law again. If anyone bring an accusation against a man, and the accused go to the river and leap into the river, if he sinks in the river, his accuser shall take possession of his house. What did we just read in the book of Revelation? What did Hasatan send a river after us? He sent a river after us and continues to try to put us through trials and trials and trials, right? But in the book of Revelation, it talks about how he spews that river out, trying to get that river to overtake Israel. And what happens? Yahweh says, no, it's not going to overtake them. I'm going to open up the earth and I'm going to swallow the river. And all that did was tick him off even more, right? So he was enraged and he went after to fight with them even more. So we've been accused non-stop from day one by Hasatan in the heavenly realm, correct? You all agree with that, right? He is the accuser. But if the river proves that the accused is not guilty, are we guilty? No. If you have faith in Messiah and you know who your Creator is and you walk in the confines of the covenant the best at your ability, you're no longer guilty. The trial by water or the trial by river doesn't apply to you. But if the river proves that the accused is not guilty, which we just saw in the book of Revelation chapter 12, where Yahweh opens up the earth and he declares to him that we're not guilty, and he escapes unhurt, then he who had brought the accusation shall be put to death. Who brought the accusation? Hasatan. So then he is cast into the what? The lake of fire. While he who leaped into the river shall take possession of the house that had belonged to his accuser. Now, remember, this gives me chills just thinking about it. This is where'd my wife go? She was here a second. Don't let me forget. And it's just her wording of things. Sometimes a lot of times it's way better than the way I word stuff. So I listen to what she tells me. So we're born into this sinful state. Whether you realize it, you want to admit it or not, you're born into the sinful state, right? Hasatan, for whatever reason, has authority over this chunk of earth we're living on, right? He's the accuser. He's accused us. Through Yeshua, we're vindicated. We've survived the river ordeal. We're going to survive the tribulation in a state. I'm not saying that we're all going to survive the tribulation, but eventually we all survive the tribulation, right? So we go through that trial by ordeal. And here's our accuser that who has owned the earth, has owned the authority of things for so many thousands of years. Now he's going to get chucked into the lake of fire. And we are vindicated, which means that anything that he owns, we get back. We get to take possession of. So what do we get to take possession of in the kingdom? The earth. New kingdom, new heavens, new earth. And he has to, this is why it says that the earth has to go through a trial by fire and it's completely destroyed, because all of the, remember the chaos, that sin, all that stuff has to be destroyed and go through this trial in order for us to begin a new creation again, remember? So what my wife wanted me to tell you is that every single thing that he has stolen from you, think about this, every single thing he has stolen from you, you're going to get back 10 times over. You may not see it now, you may not see it tomorrow, you may not see it in 6 months, you may not see it in 10 years. I don't know when none of this stuff, I don't care about timelines. I watch the news. When stuff starts lining up with scripture, with end time events, then I pay attention. I don't try to figure out timelines. I don't care. It's up to me to take this stuff that he shows us, show it to you so you can go teach it to other people. If my responsibility was to sit home and figure out timelines every day, where would I be? I'd be a false prophet many times over is what I'm getting at. Timelines don't mean, I mean, they are significant, but there's much, much better things that we could be learning. And how many here have ever saw these verses like this before today? Not many of you. And I just gave you a handful. I mean, Rico had a whole bunch more in here. I deleted.
Question about
Go ahead.
the trial by fire. Is that the same trial by fire that Sodom and Gomorrah went through?
Yep. Up in smoke.
So that people understood exactly what that was about.
Yeah. I understood exactly what was happening to them. It's us who don't understand, because we link all of this stuff with paganism to all kind of goofy things, but we don't take time to figure out how these people perceived life. This is, I mean, everything in the ancient world in their lives was surrounded around some sort of worship around multiple gods, multiple gods, multiple gods. You know, I know we're so zealous when we come out of Christianity or whatever, but how many times have we got to say, try a different perspective? When you guys go downstairs, I want every single one of you, if you're staying for Oneg, to go over and look at the dry erase board. Don't touch it. Go over and look at the dry erase board, and you tell me if I should be beating these people over the head with paganism after you see what's on that board. After you see the sign. Those of you who weren't here 2 weeks ago, and I talked about this, how many of you saw the sign when you came in? Not our sign, their sign. It says Yahweh on it. I didn't put that there. And when you see what's on the board downstairs, stop with the paganism. Yes, we're studying certain aspects of paganism from ancient countries, but we're not worshiping that way. I'm showing you this stuff so you understand what's in the book. That book was not written to you. It was written to them. It's written for you, right? But it wasn't written to you. It was written to these people who understood every single concept we've ever discussed here. Every single one of them. And I'm not making this stuff up. It's archaeological evidence. Go ahead.
There is an exact replica of the Code of Hammurabi at the University of Kansas Hospital.
Seriously? We need to take a field trip.
In Wikipedia, at the University of Kansas Medical Center, the library.
I need to go check that out. And granted, the Code of Hammurabi, there is a lot of very similar things, but there's a lot of jacked up stuff on there. There really is. And it's only because they're dealing with the same type of situations within their cultures. And Yahweh's saying, okay, we're not going to do things the way the Babylonians do it. We're going to do it this way. Really quickly, and then we got to move on.
Would you say that we all go through the trial of fire?
At some point, I don't know if we literally will go through a trial by fire. Or hey, look, it could be like, you know, when people come back from outer space and stuff like that, and we see like the space shuttles, they just start going up into flames. That could be what happens to us when we transfer from this realm to the next. I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be some literal fire that every one of us is going to have to go to. I know that if I lived in the Middle Ages and I had to go through being burnt at the stake, I mean, think about it. That's yeah. That's another perfect example. Putting them in.
With us, we go through the fire, but we
Yes.
don't smell like it. We don't even smell like it.
You don't even stink like it, Beth.
But all the nastiness on us is burned off.
Yes. Well, because it's purified. It's purification, right? All right. Last slide. I wanted to make sure I point this out to you because we've talked about the seas and the waters being chaotic. Okay. In Zechariah 14:8, it says that in that day that it shall be the living waters flow from Jerusalem, half of them toward the eastern sea and half of them toward the western sea, in summer as well in winter. When is this verse talking about? Does anybody know? Shout it out. The millennial kingdom, right? So it's saying right there that there's going to be living waters that flow from Jerusalem, half of them toward the eastern sea and half of them toward the western sea, right? It mentions seas and rivers. Okay. Revelation 21:1 says, and I saw a renewed heaven and a renewed earth, for the former heaven and the former earth have passed away and the sea is no more. We got a problem. Or do we? Huh? Yes, this is talking about the renewed heaven and the renewed earth. This is afterwards. So if you understand what they're actually talking about and what the idiomatic expression is referring to, then we don't really have an issue. Revelation 22:1-4, and he showed me a river of water of life, clear as crystal, coming from the throne of God and of the Lamb. And in the middle of its street and on either side of the river was the tree of life. So here we have these, here's the river again. There's the river of water. But Zechariah says that there will be no, or 21 says that the seas will be no more. What is this talking about? Remember that if the ancient world believes that the sea is chaotic and they see that as an enemy of all things that are livelihood or good, that's an idiomatic expression for enemies. I said it just the way you told me to.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Get everything back.
Yep. But if they realize that the seas were enemies and that the seas are everything that caused chaos in the minds of the ancient people, this is what he's saying in Revelation 21, that there will be no more seas. He's talking about there will be no more chaos, there will be no more enemies, and none of that stuff. Because the verses don't contradict each other. So even when you're looking at Zechariah chapter 14 and you look at these, now you understand that when he's talking, there's other bodies of water, how come there's no seas? There will be no more chaos because we've gone through this complete new restoration of all creation. We've been renewed and we've come out of the trial vindicated. Amen? Amen. Alan, you want to come up? Alan's going to come up and bless the bread and the wine, and I'm only a few minutes over, and then we're going to go eat. Yeah, brother.
Good. Well, how many of you are encouraged? Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Well, Beth was asking about trial by fire. 1 Peter 1:7 says that all of our faith are being tried by fire right now. Would that be a true statement? And so one day your works will be tested by fire. And the fact of the matter is I look forward to the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego